Welcome to Notable Approvals. I am attorney Amanda Shaffer. I have not been on one of these lives for a couple of weeks. I just got back from my honeymoon, so I'm all refreshed and ready to go, and I have a great new case to talk about today. If you may have noticed, my background's a little different, and there's a lot more light because I finally moved into my new office with a window, so I am very excited about that to get some natural lighting. And before I do get to the case, don't forget to make sure to like us and follow us on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. And if you like what you are watching or you find it to be helpful or someone that you know who will find it helpful, please make sure to share this video with them as well. So today I have a really fascinating case. This is one of those marathon cases I talk about, and I call it that because a marathon is very long, and this case has been going on for a very long time, since 2015. This client is a native and citizen of Mali. He first entered the U.S. in 2007 on a visitor B1B2 visa. In 2014, he married his U.S. citizen wife, and she then filed an I-130 petition for him. They did file the initial petition without a lawyer. They hired us when they got their first interview notice. Actually, it was their second interview notice. Their first interview didn't go great, so then they hired us. And that was a Stokes interview, which is where they separate you and ask questions. Now, the first hiccup in this case came when the wife pulled me aside personally and said that she was scared to go to the interview. And I was like, why? She goes, well, because she had a baby with her. And she's like, they're going to ask me why my husband's name is not on birth certificate, because the baby was born when they were married. And I'm like, well, what happened? And it turns out that she was a victim of sexual assault, and it got her pregnant. And that's what happened. And, I told her, first of all, that wasn't what I was expecting to hear. Of course, I felt, I tried to sympathize with her as much as I could. And I told her, look, it's going to be okay. We are going to be perfectly honest with them about it. This, and not only that, like, he treated the child as if it was his own. So that was just something that we had to deal with, because I think in New York State, not in every state, but when you're married in a lot of states and you have a baby, your husband is presumed to be the father. In this case, he wasn't, and that meant he wasn't at the hospital. So that was what she was even more concerned about. But basically what we did, we went in that day. It turned out they didn't have, I think we needed a Bambara interpreter, and they didn't have one available. Hi, Manuel, thank you for watching. And I spoke to the I don't normally do this, but when it's warranted, I do. I spoke to the USCIS officer privately. I said, there's something really important I need to speak with you about, a very sensitive issue. And I explained to her what my client's wife had said to me. And my client knew it, but he didn't necessarily understand it because of cultural differences. And she really wasn't sure how to really explain things to him. There was a language barrier. He spoke English, but it wasn't great, and she didn't speak Bambara. But regardless, I said, this very sensitive issue, if there are questions asked about this, which it is common, if you're married and father's name's not on the birth certificate, USCIS officer often asks, well, what happened? Why not? So that officer was very nice, and we were lucky during that interview that she said, I'm not, don't worry, I'm not gonna ask about this. But because I didn't have a Bambara interpreter, we had to go back. So we go back, and I sat in on the interview, of course, the whole time. I remember it was a long one, but I remember walking out there thinking it went pretty well. And then the next day, I'm trying to figure it out. The next day, they actually denied this. So they had the Stokes interview. I was there. I took really good notes, it gets denied. So we have 30 days to appeal it. And if you watch any of my other notable approvals, or I've talked about cases that were denied, and we look at the decision, do we appeal it or do we refile it? So in this situation, we decided to appeal it. And the reason was, when I looked through the denial, especially since I was fortunate. Thank you, William Jamie. Yes, it's a very nice window. When we're looking at the factors, we say, well, thank you, William, very much. So, oh, I forgot I could show these. I haven't done this in so long. I like to show our comments. Thank you, thank you. Anyways, so I'm looking at it and it's saying that they gave inconsistent answers only 5 times. And then the officer says, this is what I asked, this is what they said, this is their explanation. Well, the explanations weren't great. In fact, they weren't discrepancies, they didn't seem to be inconsistent, and I knew that because I took really good notes on it. So there was that. They ignored all the answers they got correct, which were a lot, and they also said, oh, you don't have enough paper evidence. Hi, Tanya. Thank you. Thanks for watching. They didn't have enough paper evidence. However, they actually adequately explained to the officer he was like, why don't you have this? Why don't you have that? And they gave good reasons. So I felt that, look, this was probably one that might be worth appealing. And, they had already been going through this now for 2 years. So we're like, let's just go for it. So basically, when you do a denial like this, you have 30 days, or appeal, I'm sorry, 30 days to appeal it. And we had to write the entire brief as well within those 30 days. And the very first thing I wrote about, which I've never seen on another case, was that they said that my client had an interview in 2014. They hadn't even been married yet, so it was not them. And it was like, you had a Stokes interview in December 2014. First thing I wrote was it was in 2016, and I'm actually concerned that the officer may be confusing this with another case because that was not the date of their interview. I was there. So that was the first thing I said. Then I talked about the joint evidence that they had or didn't have. It only mentioned 2 things in the denial that they had, and I said, well, you didn't mention the extensive transaction history in the joint bank accounts, and you actually didn't mention all the fact that you asked them about why, for example, why don't you have a joint lease? Or no, it was a joint taxes. Petitioner said, hey, I take care of the kids. I don't work enough to have a high enough income to file taxes. And we did have a joint sponsor in that case. And so there was always a reason, and I've always said on all of these that the reason there's no right or wrong evidence to submit is because everyone's different. And if you have a legitimate reason for not having a lot of joint documents at the time, then your case can still be approved, and that cannot be a reason to deny it. So I went through all that, and then I went through how each of the 5 things that they said were discrepancies were not actual discrepancies. And one of those things actually I wrote was immaterial, meaning even if you can say that they gave different answers to the question, it doesn't matter because it doesn't say anything about their bona fide marriage. So he asked her was what his wife wore on the first date. And he said green, a green outfit, and she said leopard print. And when he asked them about it, she said, yeah, it was a faux leopard print in green. Now, I'm a fan of leopard print myself. I had leopard prints in all different colors. It's not real leopard, obviously. I don't believe I have any real leopard because I believe it is illegal. I could be wrong, but I believe that. So nobody really has real leopard. But the officer didn't believe them and wrote it in the denial that there could be any type of green leopard print. And I was like, that's not a discrepancy. That's just you being ignorant of fashion. So it was things like that I was able to point out. And because I was at the interview with them, and people always say, should I bring a lawyer? With the Stokes interview, I always recommend it. And that's because you need somebody there to really be paying attention and taking notes in case of a denial like this. Because, and then they also didn't mention the consistent answers that they had. And I kind of went through a lot of, I was like, look, the officer asked them, all these questions about their family. And then I listed the questions and they got all of these answers correct. And these are all really important to, establishing a good faith marriage. So I felt pretty good about the brief, but it took forever. We hadn't heard anything for forever. Like when I say forever, I had to submit this within a month. So if the interview's December 2016, by the 2017, by January 2017, it had to be submitted, and it was. About 3.5 years later, jump to May of 2020, and we get a BIA decision, and that's the Board of Immigration Appeals. Finally, and what does it say? There's no Stokes transcript, so it has to go back to USCIS. And I was like, there's definitely a transcript. I looked at my brief. I cited to a transcript. Well, there was. What the officer did was typed up some of the questions and some of the answers, printed it out, had my client initial it. That's what I had gotten a copy of from USCIS. But I actually noted places in my appeal where the transcript left things off. So there's actually supposed to take word for word transcript of what you say. And that wasn't even close. There would be a question and no answer, type of thing. And then, or a part of the answer. And I wrote the officer left off, blah, blah, blah. So it might not have been enough that there was this, subpar transcript or incomplete transcript that the BIA had to work with. Because if I had to be able to prove that based on what really happened there, the officer was wrong. So the BIA agreed that the record needs to be developed more fully because clearly something's missing here from the officer, and that it does appear the officer may have in fact been wrong in concluding that it wasn't a good faith marriage. Now, obviously, in the most ideal world, the BIA would approve it or remand it with the instruction to approve it. We've gotten those before too. In this case, it wasn't shocking to me, just because without the transcript, the BIA can only do so much because there wasn't another record to really go off of. But because I convinced them that were the record to be developed more, then this marriage would look a lot differently. Because of that, they now have another interview finally scheduled for next year. It took 8 months, I think, for the BIA to send it back to USCIS. Yeah, COVID, but also they're slow. We do have one question which is related to what we're talking about. Christina asked, Amanda, are Stokes interviews only in the New York City office? Christina, they are not only in the New York City office. Stokes is what that type of interview is called in this jurisdiction, so in New York. In other places across the country, they may call it something different. It's because it was a name of somebody in a case at one point that became a BIA decision or an appellate decision. But what a Stokes interview is when you and your spouse are separated. The officer asks your spouse questions, you switch, then you get asked the same set of questions, and then you're both brought in at the end, and the officer says, okay, here are all the things that you gave me different answers on. Explain why you gave me different answers. So it might not be called a Stokes where you live, but that's generally speaking, if you're either already in removal proceedings, it'll be your first interview. If you're in removal proceedings and then you get married, it'll be your first interview. Or if you file after, not even just married, I think it's also if you file the I-130 after you go into proceedings. And the other thing is if you fail the first interview for any reason, which can be a whole host of things, then you have the Stokes interview. And they could even call Stokes interview for a first interview if there's been suspected marriage fraud in the past. That's possible. Each jurisdiction's a little different on what guidelines they decide to do Stokes, but in New York, we know if you go to your first interview, it's joint. doesn't go well, your second one's going to be a Stokes. So I hope I answered your question, Christina, and thank you for watching and thank you for asking. So yeah, I will hopefully be back with an update on the case once we have a decision. Just because there are interviews in July does not mean we'll have a decision in July, although fingers are crossed, because these, like I said, this client's been waiting. You're very welcome, Christina. This client's been waiting since 2015, so fingers crossed. I mean, they're very good people. They've been through a lot, and I'm hoping that we go back, everything goes well. So that is all today for notable approvals. I'm gonna hopefully be back tomorrow. Not definitely this week. When you miss work, you got a lot to catch up on. But I think this was a great one to come back to. And I will also be posting some new things, such as episode 10 of our game show, Are You Smarter Than a Naturalized Citizen? Nope, I'm sorry, episode 9, which will be July 7th. I'll be posting about that as well. And of course, if you have questions, comments about your case, concerns, my contact information has been scrolling along the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to contact me. And if you like what you saw here today, felt that it would be helpful for others, please share this video and make sure to like us, follow us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube so you don't miss any more lives. Thank you all for watching.